The Bengals have completed one of the fastest rebuilds in NFL history, if not the fastest. I don't think I can recall a team going from 4-11 to Super Bowl in 1 year. To start off, we're going to go all the way back to 2011 to 2015. You'd think it'd be good the Bengals made the playoffs 5 years in a row, but they ended up losing in the playoffs 5 years in a row. And to take it back even further, in 2009 they made the playoffs, but lost in the first round. So for 7 years straight, they made the playoffs 6 times, and went 0-6. Then 2018 for the Bengals wasn't looking any better. Marvin Lewis wasn't looking like he was going to stay the coach unless like the Bengals won the Super Bowl or at least won a playoff game. And to make things worse, AJ Green battled injuries all season and Dalton ended up getting hurt, and they ended up the season 6-10, and Marvin Lewis was fired. The Bengals then elected to hire Zac Taylor as their new head coach, which I think was a great move. I mean, obviously, it's easy to say that now when you saw everything, but it makes sense as he was really crucial in helping develop Jared Goff. Knowing that the Bengals were going to need to bring in a new quarterback, he seemed like a good guy to help develop a new team, especially a new quarterback. Now, 2019 was hell for the Bengals. They went 2-14, their worst record in franchise history. Andy Dalton and AJ Green both dealt with more injuries. Andy Dalton started 13 games and went 2-11 with 16 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. Not very good at all. I mean, he didn't have as good of a team around him, but he definitely wasn't looking like the future of this team. Now, after that, this was the turning point. I mean, Zac Taylor went into there and went 2-14. Their team was falling apart. Their stars weren't looking good. I don't think anyone had any hope for the Bengals, but then they turned everything around at this moment. They started out by punching in Joe Mixon as their main guy, signing him to $50 million over 4 years. Alright, I'm sorry, that it wasn't funny. It's also said, while making this video, there's now a warrant out for Mixon's arrest. Allegedly, he pointed a gun at a woman downtown for some reason and said, "I should shoot you right now, the cops can come and get me." It's sad because now this is the second time he's done something that we know of, and hopefully he can figure things out, turn it around, because it also just really hurts the Bengals team as a whole. So after locking Joe Mixon into the running back position, their next big move was letting Andy Dalton walk. They didn't re-sign him, and it was obvious why, because in 2020 they drafted Joe Burrow at the number 1 pick. And the Bengals' next big pick was in round 2, pick number 33. They drafted T. Higgins to add on to Tyler Boyd and AJ Green for some weapons for Joe Burrow. Now, the Bengals' 2020 season was decent. Joe Burrow started to adapt to the team. He played pretty well. He showed a lot of potential, but then in week 11 he tore his ACL, and then they ended the season with a 2-5 record for a total of 4-11-1. So it was just more disappointment for Bengals fans, especially that their star got hurt, but they had a lot of young talent on their team. Now in 2021, they lost AJ Green in the offseason. It was time for him to go. He wasn't in his prime anymore. It wasn't nearly as good. Now, he was one of the best wide receivers for the Bengals of all time, but it was time for him to go. Now, the Bengals had the 5th round pick in the 21 draft. They had options of Penei Sewell, a great lineman to protect Joe Burrow, or they could draft Jamar Chase, who was Joe Burrow's number 1 wide receiver at LSU. And they ended up going with Jamar Chase. I think either option would have been great. Penei Sewell's had a great rookie season with the Lions, but honestly, I would have went with Chase as well, as there's already chemistry there. They've played with each other for multiple years. It seems like the best option. Now, in the 2021 and 2022 offseason combined, the Bengals went crazy in the free agency. They spent over $100 million on free agents alone. Now, along with building up their insane offense with Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, they've also been building a stellar defense. In 2018, the Bengals drafted Jesse Bates, a safety, in the 2nd round, and then in 2020, they signed Von Bell from the Saints, another safety, to a 3-year, $18 million contract, and together the last few years, they have been one of the best safety duos in the league. The Bengals' 2021 season, everything seemed just to click. Joe Burrow, their defense improved, and especially Jamar Chase, who won Offensive Rookie of the Year, played all 17 games, scored 13 touchdowns in the regular season, and had 1,500 yards. In 2021, Joe Burrow also proved that he wasn't a buff, as he led the Bengals on a 10-7 season, going 10-6 in the games that he played in, had 70% of his passes completed, threw for 4,600 yards, 34 touchdowns to only 14 interceptions. He won Comeback Player of the Year, which he deserved after his scary injury and playing on just a young team that was just needed to grow together. Joe Burrow is just a prime example of how a franchise quarterback can just totally change the direction of a team. They brought in Joe Burrow and they built around him. They brought in Jamar Chase. They already had T. Higgins. They have a good running back, Joe Mixon. Now, Jamar Chase is kind of an exception. There's not going to be many instances where you can bring in your quarterback's favorite wide receiver from college who's also a star. But the quarterback is obviously the most important position on a football team. And the Bengals got a good one, and they built around him, giving him weapons, giving him a good defense. They're continuing to build their defense. I'll get into that more. And they just really came out of nowhere. Just think for a second what Joe Burrow has done for the Cincinnati Bengals franchise. After losing in the playoffs for the first round like 8 years in a row, and then missing the playoffs for like 4 years in a row, having the worst record in franchise history, then drafting Joe Burrow at #1 overall, and then he tears his ACL and then comes back and leads his team to the Super Bowl. It's bizarre. Now, the highlight of the 2021 regular season was obviously Joe Burrow beating Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead. They beat him by 3, and then they went on to beat them in the AFC Championship by 3 again, which is insane, but definitely just a highlight of the regular season. Joe Burrow shows that he could be one of the greats. Now, another huge part of Joe Burrow's and the Cincinnati Bengals' success is their defense. In 2021, they ranked 13th in points per game allowed, and in 2022, this past year, they ranked 6th in points per game allowed. I would say they definitely were a top 5 defense. I already mentioned Jesse Bates and Von Bell, the safety duo, but they also have a lot of other stars. During the Bengals' cash dump of free agents the last 2 years, Trey Hendrickson was one of the huge pickups from the Saints in 2021. Hendrickson really broke out in the last 3 years. In 2020, he had 13.5 sacks. The Bengals were all over him, signed him, and he had a monster season with the Bengals with 14 sacks and a Pro Bowl appearance. Not to mention another 3.5 sacks on top of that in the playoffs. And then this past year, it was a little bit less exciting, but still amazing. 8 sacks and another Pro Bowl appearance. The last defensive player I'll be mentioning in this video, there's probably a lot more I can mention. Comment below who you think I should have, but it's defensive linebacker Logan Wilson. He was drafted in the 3rd round of the 2022 draft, and he's been an extremely strong player. He started 2 games in 2020, his rookie season, 13 in 2021, and 15 in 2022, and he's put up monster numbers. He took down 2 interceptions his rookie season, 4 in 2021, and 1 this past season. Had 1 sack his first 2 years, 2.5 last year, and for combined tackles, he had 33 his rookie season, 100 in 2021, and 123 this past season. And he hasn't even started every game of the season. He led the team in tackles last year, and he's a developing star in the making. I lied, there was one more player I wanted to mention, and it's cornerback Eli Apple. The Bengals acquired him 2 years ago from the Giants, and he's been a solid corner, but the problem is he talks a lot of trash, and he's a pretty hated player throughout the league. The Bengals have to decide if they want to re-sign him or not. I don't think it'll be a bad decision to re-sign him. I don't know if he'll start as cornerback, but he's definitely a great backup and adds depth to the lineup. Recently, he's been saying, "I'll go anywhere where I'll talk my biggest trash." So, I don't know. People hate on him a lot as well. They're like, he always gets burned, but I don't think he really gets burned that much. I think he just talks a lot of trash, so when he gets burned, it's just more noted than when other corners get burned. Now, back to Joe Burrow. He already has the most wins by any Bengals quarterback in the postseason. He led his team to 2 AFC championships in a row after being injured his rookie season. He's been phenomenal. And with the Bengals' stellar offense and stellar defense, I think they're there to stay. I think the Bengals and the Chiefs run the AFC. I don't think the Bills have anything on either of these teams, especially as you saw the Bengals destroyed the Bills this season in the playoffs in Buffalo, in Buffalo's element. Honestly, Buffalo's in a really rough shape. It doesn't look like they're going to get anywhere near a Super Bowl anytime soon with the Bengals and Chiefs led by Joe Burrow and Mahomes just running the AFC. But that's a story for another time. Now, there is one problem I have with Joe Burrow, and that's his playoff performances in the 4th quarter. There's been multiple games in the playoffs where Joe Burrow doesn't really perform in the 4th quarter, especially the Super Bowl against the Rams. He had multiple drives to go win that, and he didn't. And in the loss against Kansas City this year in the AFC Championship, he had a few drives in the 4th quarter where he didn't put any points on the board when the game was tied. But Joe Burrow wins football games. He might not have the flashiest performances in the postseason, but he shows he can do it in the regular season, and his best performance by far was against Buffalo. This year, in the 2nd round, the divisional round of the playoffs, he played out of his mind and just destroyed Buffalo the full 60 minutes of the game. So yes, Joe Burrow, I think, has room to improve, but every player has room to improve, and it's only been 3 years in the league for Joe Burrow, and he was injured his first season, and he brought his team to AFC Championships back-to-back back-to-back years in his second and third season, so you can't really hate on him. Joe Burrow can find a way to take less sacks. The Bengals improve their offensive line a bit, and Joe Burrow can clutch up in the fourth quarter, then I think he and the Bengals might have a chance to win a few Super Bowls in the next upcoming years. Now, the last thing I want to talk about was the Ravens and Bengals beef, which I think is pretty funny. A lot of Ravens fans are always just like, if Lamar was healthy, if this and that, if Lamar was healthy, we'd be in the Super Bowl, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of Bengals fans are like, bro, really? And I agree with them. Bro, really, Ravens fans? Shut the fuck up. If Lamar was healthy, it's just the dumbest thing to say. First off, if Lamar was healthy, I think they might have beat the Bengals, but it would have been an entirely different game, and you guys, I don't think, would be anywhere near the Super Bowl, as I think the Bills would have destroyed the Ravens. And second off, the key word is if Lamar was healthy. The thing is, when you have a quarterback like Lamar that rushes, the injuries are just a part of what comes, like Justin Fields. When you have a rushing quarterback like that, injuries are just going to be part of the game, and you're not going to always have your quarterback. That's the price you get when you have a rushing quarterback. Now, the only thing I do have to say against the Bengals on this game was the only reason you won was because the Ravens, I lost all their brain cells. Their coaching staff lost all their brain cells and called the dumbest play imaginable and gave the Bengals a 99-yard touchdown return to win the game. I think it was the dumbest play of the year. I don't know who thought it was a good idea for Tyler Huntley to try to jump over the line from the 1 yard line. That's a play for Lamar. Did they forget that Lamar wasn't in the game? If they score a touchdown there, did the Bengals win that game? I mean, the Ravens really showed up with their backup quarterback. I was really surprised. They hadn't scored over 20 points in like 10 weeks, and they almost did it. They should have did it against the Bengals. So, and again, in that game, Joe Burrow in the fourth quarter, when the game was tied and when they had the lead, he wasn't able to extend their lead, but they won the game, so that's all that matters. But it'd be nice if Joe Burrow could find a way to improve in the fourth quarter. But if the Bengals don't get that touchdown return and the Ravens score there, do the Bengals still win that game? I guess we'll never know. And anyway, that's going to be the end of this video. If you guys enjoyed, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot, as these videos take a long time to make. And if you're a Bengals fan, I have more Bengals content coming on the way. In the end, Joe Burrow is a solid quarterback. The Bengals are still developing. They're still young. They have a lot of moves to make, and they continue to make the right ones in this upcoming offseason and then the draft. They have a shot at another Super Bowl appearance, and hopefully they can win one with Joe Burrow soon. But until then, we won't talk about the Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow beef, but we can say the Bengals own the Bills.